this episode of the Stitch Sessions. I'm so happy to have you guys with me today to work on a brand new project. If you're new here, my name is Karen and I love all things crochet and crafty. And I hope you'll enjoy coming along with me on today's crochet project. Today we are going to be working on the Harlequin Beanie. And this beanie is really easy. We're just going to create a rectangular panel. We're going to sew up the sides and the top to create a beanie. And the stitch pattern we're going to use is the almond stitch. And for those of you that have seen some of my stitch tutorials in recent weeks, you will remember this one from a few weeks back. If you missed that tutorial, I will leave a link for it in the description box down below. And the other reason I'm excited about working on this is because I'm going to be gifting it to my beautiful goddaughter who is 5.5 years old. So I am making this one for a toddler, but there will be a link in the description box down below to my crochet hat sizing chart, where it will go over how you can size this for an adult or a baby, etc., etc. So without further ado, let's look at the materials we need for this project and let's get stitching up our Harlequin beanie. Okay, so let's talk about the materials we're going to use for this project. I am going to be using the Baby Love Baby yarn, and it comes in 120 gram balls or 360 meters. It's 100% acrylic, and I'm using the color white. And this is considered a lightweight number 3 yarn. So for this project, what I'm gonna do is I am actually gonna work with 2 strands held together, and that's why I've got 2 skeins. Really, to create this hat, 1 skein will be plenty. I'm making mine for a child, so I won't be using up that much yarn. I am using two strands together because of the fact that it is a lightweight number 3, it's on the thin side, but I really like how soft this yarn is. So I'm just going to use the 2 strands together just to kind of give it a little bit more sustenance, I guess we'll say. So you can see here it's fairly thin, which would make for a beautiful pullover or cardigan. So keep that in mind for future projects. So that's what I'm going to be using for the yarn. I have the color white and I have some of this leftover purple, and I have not actually been able to find this color. Whenever I find the Baby Love, they always have pinks and greens and blues and white, but I have not been able to come across this. So this is some leftover that I have from a previous project. And you may recall I used this for the almond stitch tutorial, which is the stitch we're going to be using today, right? So I'm doing mine in 2 colors, so that's why I have a contrasting color. I will also be using 2 strands held together with this one. I'm basically using the outside end and the inside end to work with this. You don't have to use this yarn. If you choose to use a medium size 4-weight yarn, then you don't have to hold the 2 together, but that's totally up to you. The other thing about this yarn is it's very, very static, and I thought it was just because I had this lying around, but I found even with this brand new skein of yarn, like, it's very staticky. I'm not sure what the content is here. It does say it's 100% acrylic, but anywho, you may come across that. So that is my yarn. The hook size I'm going to be using for this project is a 5mm hook, which is also known as an H or a size 8. And the yarn recommends actually using a size 4, but I always like going up a hook size when I want the stitches to just sit a little bit more relaxed. And especially if you're a tight crocheter, this is a little trick that I recommend doing. Always go up a hook size. You are also going to need 2 pom-poms. Now, you can make your own pom-poms, but I found that for this project, these really cute furry ones really just added the perfect touch. Now, you can find these at most craft stores, although I did go to Michael's and I didn't find these particular ones, and it could be just because I'm a little late in the season, but I did find these on Amazon. So if you're curious, I'll just leave a link for those in the description box down below. It comes actually in a pack of 12. And you can get a bunch of different colors here too. So I've got some I'm going to save for other projects. So I'm pretty happy with that. So these are, you can sew these on, but they actually have a snap, which I think is really handy. So if you're gonna throw this hat in the wash, you can just unsnap them. So they come with this little backing here, and you would just sew this to the part where you want the pom-pom on. So you're just gonna sew in through the little holes there. And then when you're ready to put your pom-pom on, they just snap into place like that. Just nice and easy, and they're really nice and secure on the hat, which I think is a great idea. So this is what I use for my final embellishment there, okay? So I almost forgot, you are going to need some thread and a thread needle. So a thread needle is different than a yarn needle. It's much thinner, and the eye, of course, is much smaller to accommodate the thread. So you'll need this for sewing in your pom-poms at the end of your project. As always, make sure you have a pair of scissors and a darning needle on hand to sew in any ends. And for this project, it'll be handy for you to have a piece of paper and a pen, pencil, or marker just to take down some measurements to create your hat. So let's start off with that. Okay, so for this project, you're going to need two main measurements. You are going to need your hat depth, which is also known as the length, okay? And you're also going to need your head circumference, okay? And actually, I have put together a head measurement chart that you can reference to if you're making this for an adult or a baby or a toddler. And I'll leave a link for that in the description box down below. You can find it on the website at crochetcrafty.com. And it's totally free, downloadable measurement chart. But here's a great way to just figure out how to create your hat if you don't have a measurement chart, but you have the head handy. So the head is generally, and of course I'm not an artist, shaped somewhat like that. That is a terrible head, but I think you guys get the gist of where I'm going with this. So the first is the hat depth or the length, and that basically is from the top of the head down to where the ears sit. And usually I want to cover the ears, so I want to go right about there, okay? So I know for a child, my hat depth should be anywhere between 8 to 8.5 inches, okay? Which is approximately anywhere between 200 and 220 millimeters, which is 20 to 22 centimeters. Sorry guys, I was looking at my ruler and it had millimeters. So for those of you on metric, you want to go by 20 to 22 centimeters or 8 to 8.5 inches, okay? And again, this is for a child. So if you're doing it for an adult, you're going to need a larger measurement. Just check that measurement chart or take your measurements. Your head circumference, the way you measure it, some people think it's this way, okay? In fact, that's not how you wear a hat. You wear a hat this way. So you want to take the measurement from your forehead down to the base of your head, okay? So that is how you're going to wrap the measuring tape around your head. And for my child, she's got kind of a larger head. Children are usually between about 18 to 20 inches, sometimes 21. I know my goddaughter has a slightly larger head, so she usually goes around 22 inches. So I'm actually going to make mine 21 inches. And so I always take off an inch just to allow for the hat to sit snugly on the head. Remember, there's going to be some stretch, right? So if you make yours too loose, then their head is just going to flop around in the hat. And by the way, this is going to be probably about 50 centimeters, give or take. Again, just grab a measuring tape and get your measurement. So that's what you want to have. You want to have your hat depth and your head circumference. So the first thing you want to focus on is your hat depth. Okay, so that's what we're going to start with first. So let's get our yarn and get cooking. Okay guys, so I am going to start with my white yarn, and I'm just putting this pink paper here so it'll show a contrast, because white on white doesn't always show up the best. So I'm going to start off with my yarn, and I'm going to grab my 2 strands and put them together. And for this project, we are using the almond stitch, and I'm going to explain how many stitches we're going to need in a second. So I'm going to just start off by placing a slip knot on my hook just to get my yarn going here. Okay, just like that. Now the almond stitch, if you watch that stitch tutorial, you'll know that the almond stitch is done in multiples of 8 plus an additional 5. So I know for my length, which I need approximately 8.5 inches, I am going to stitch up 40 chains, okay? Now I will add an additional 5 because of how we're going to anchor this project. So I'll add a little bit of length, but I'm not too worried about it. And that will give me a little bit of length plus a turning chain. So if you're following along exactly with me, I'm making my hat for a 5-year-old. That's a child. I'm going to chain up 45 chains in total. Keep in mind, if you are a super tight crocheter, you do want to, probably you're going to need to chain more or go up a hook size if you're going to follow along with me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and chain up 45 chains. So I'm going to yarn over 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I've done my 45 chains, and I always like to kind of double check. So I've put it against my measuring tape here. And in fact, I am at 10 inches. I've gone well over my 8.5. This tends to happen sometimes, especially because I'm using 2 strands together and I'm stitching a little bit looser. So the same number of stitches is giving me a longer length. I don't mind this at all, because you'd rather have a little bit of length left over, because they can always fold that brim over instead of being too short. So I am going to leave it as that. So 8.5 inches approximately will fit over the head. This is also going to give me a little extra give for the brim. So 10 inches is where I'm sitting at, and I'm very happy with that. Okay, so 10 inches or about 25-ish centimeters. I always have to remember about my metric friends. In fact, you know, it's so funny, growing up in Canada, in my day, we learned both the metric and the imperial system at the same time, because there was that period of time where they were phasing out imperial and they were bringing in metric, but they've never truly phased it out. So I'm just kind of funny that way. When it comes to measurements, I still think of things in terms of the imperial. But if you talk to me about distances, I always think of it in metric. Like Canadians will always talk about things in kilometers when it comes to distance. But anywho, just a little aside there. So back to the stitching. All right, so we have our 45 chains. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find the second chain from the hook, which is right there, and we are going to slip stitch into that stitch. So we're going to start right away creating our almond stitch pattern. So there's a slip stitch, and then we're going to proceed to slip stitch into each of the next 3 stitches. So you're just going to insert your hook, pull through and pull through. And especially during these slip stitches, you really want to be careful not to stitch tightly, because we're going to have to work back into those slip stitches, okay? So I have 2 more, so I'm going to insert, pull up a loop, and continue to pull through. See, I'm just keeping it really relaxed, and I have 1 more. Okay, so now I have 4 slip stitches in total, and now into each of the next 4 stitches, we're going to do a half double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, insert your hook into that next stitch, pull up a loop. So you have 3. Remember, I have 2 strands held together. Yarn over and pull through all 3 of them. Okay, and you're going to continue doing that for the next 3 stitches. So you're going to see that the stitches we're working are in sets of 4. Okay, so we did 4 slip stitches, and then we're doing 4 half double crochets. Just like that. Okay, so that's what starts creating that cool little almondy shape. So 4 slip stitches, 4 half double crochets, and we keep alternating that. So now we're going to go back and do 4 slip stitches. So insert into the next one and just pull up nice and relaxed. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so there we go. So we can see the shaping happening. And then the next 4 will be half doubles. The next 4 will be slip stitches, etc., etc. So you're going to repeat this all the way to the end of your row, except you want to leave the last 8 stitches free. So you're going to do this all the way to the end until you have 8 stitches left. I'm going to meet up with you to tell you what we're going to do for those last 8 stitches. Okay, so I have 8 stitches left, and my work right now is looking like this. So you can see those beautiful little ridges happening there. Now these last 8 stitches, we are just simply going to single crochet into them, okay? So you're going to always have 8 stitches with single crochets. So we have 1, 2, and the other thing I would maybe recommend is actually to place a little marker here or a safety pin. In fact, I'm going to do that right now just to make sure that it's all nice and clear for you guys. Okay, so before I go any further, so I'm going to put the safety pin right in that first single crochet. This will always be a reminder of where our single crochet section is, because this single crochet section is going to be the brim portion of our hat, okay? So this is the main body of the hat, and then this is going to be the brim, and it'll all make sense as we work up a few more rows. So I'm just going to finish off these last few stitches here, a single crochet into each stitch to the end. Okay, so I have completed row 1, and my work looks something like this. And at the end of row 1, you're going to have 44 stitches, and that is your stitch count that you should have for every row from now on. Okay, so if you're following along with me, it should be 44 stitches. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go into row number 2. We're going to chain 1 and turn our work. We are going to place a single crochet stitch into each single crochet stitch, but we're going to make sure we work into the back loops only. So you just want to turn your work a little bit so you can see the tops of your loops. So those are the V's there. So right away into the very first stitch, we're going to go into the back loop only. So this loop here closest to you is the front loop, and this one right here is the back loop. So I'm just going to insert my hook into that loop, and I'm going to single crochet. Okay. Then I'm going to do the same thing into the next one. Back loop only and single crochet. So working into the back loops of these single crochets is what's going to create that really pretty ridge-like effect for the brim of your hat. Okay. So you're going to do that all the way until you get to your marker. Okay, so this is my 8th stitch, so I just want to take that marker out for a moment, and I'm going to work into that back loop and single crochet. And then what I want to do is just put that marker right back in so that I don't forget where it is. And this way, those of you that really hate counting, this is a great way to get around that. And as you can see, that first ridge of our rib has started to form. Okay, so now we're going back into our almond pattern. And for row number 2, you're just going to imitate what you see. So right now I can see that the next 4 stitches are slip stitches. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to slip stitch into each of the next 4. And then I have 4 half double crochets, and I'm going to do half double crochets into each of those. What is different for now, and what's going to be the way you're going to do it, and what is going to be the way you're going to do it for the rest of the project, is we're going to work into the back loops only. So just like what we did here in your brim, you're doing this for the whole project, okay? So just turn your work, and this is why it's so important, those slip stitches, you do not want to have them tight or you're going to have an issue getting your hook in there, okay? So there's my first one there. I'm going to go into that back loop. You're going to have to help it along a little bit with the slip stitches. And I'm going to slip stitch and then into the next one. Keeping it relaxed, and into the next one. Oops. And I have one more. Just like that. Okay. And now I have 4 half double crochets, so I'm going to go into the back loops of there. Now be careful with half double crochets because there's kind of 2 sides to this. So you can see these loops on the side, and then if you turn, that's actually the top of your stitch. So you want to make sure that you're going into this back loop and not this one, because that's actually the full stitch, okay? So make sure that you really turn your work so you can see it from the top. Yarn over, insert your hook into the back loop only, and half double crochet. Back loop only, whoops, and double crochet. Okay, so that is basically what you're going to repeat now. Slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, etc. And they're all into the back loop. So you probably can't tell just quite yet, but this little ridge is going to really create the formation of our almond shape. So go ahead and do that to the end of row number 2. And then I'm going to meet up with you when you're just on your last stitch, because this is where we're going to change colors. So we're going to change colors every 2 rows, okay? So go ahead and finish row number 2, and I'll meet back up with you here in a bit. Okay, so I'm at the end of row number 2, and I've got 1 stitch left. Now, before I slip stitch into that very last stitch, this is where I'm going to introduce my new color, okay? So at the end of row 2 of the repeat, you will insert your hook into the back loop only as you normally do. So that's that chain 1, which is the turning chain there. So I'm going to insert my hook into there. And instead of picking up the white, I'm just going to drop the white, and I'm going to introduce my other color. Now, if you decide to do this in a solid color, then you don't have to worry about this. But I am going to change colors. So you're just then going to hook your new color through, and now you're ready to begin row number 3. So you just want to pull that tight, and you can choose to knot it here if you like. I'm just going to leave mine there and sew it in at the end. I feel pretty confident that it's secure. So we're going to go on to row number 3. So for row number 3, we're actually going to, whoops, chain 1 and turn our work. And now we're going to work across. You can see the almonds are really taking shape. And we're going to do the opposite. So where you see slip stitches, we're going to place half double crochets. Where you see half double crochets, we're going to place slip stitches. So for row 3, remember we're still working to the back loops only. You're going to turn your work, and we're going to place a half double crochet. So that chain 1 didn't really count as anything. We're going to go back into that same stitch. I'm going to insert your hook there, and we're going to half double crochet. Whoops, I only caught one of the strands there. So make sure you're catching both strands. There we go. And half double crochet there. And just make sure to pull down on the white to make sure it's nice and secure. So I'm going to do that for each of the next 3 stitches. So these are slip stitches, so they're going to need a little bit of help just getting them through. And I know I've said this already several times, but this is why you don't want to stitch those slip stitches too tightly. Okay, and this is our 3rd one. And this is why I'm changing colors for this stitch. I just think it's going to really accentuate the texture and the shape of this stitch pattern, which I think is so cool. So I have one more here, half double crochet into the back loops only, remember. Okay, and now we have 4 half double crochets, so we're going to slip stitch into the back loops only. So I just turn my work, make sure it's the top of the stitch, and I just slip stitch nice and relaxed. There's the 2nd one. The 3rd. And the 4th. Okay, and by going into the back loops, it really pushes forward that cool almond shape. Okay, so the next one are 4 slip stitches, so we know we're going to half double crochet. So there's 1. So going into the slip stitches will take just a little bit of patience, but I promise you the end result will so be worth it. So we're going to do 1 more here, and then I think you pretty much have the gist to how this pattern is going. Okay, so there you go. So you can see now the opposite effect is happening. Just love that. Okay, so go to the end of row number 3, doing the alternate. So these are slips, these are half double, slip stitch, half double, slip stitch, half double. Remember, these are your single crochets. So always do the last 8 single crochets in the back loops only. So go ahead and finish row number 3, and then we'll be ready to take you on to row number 4, and then you're off on your own, and then your pattern repeat will be complete. Okay, so I finished row number 3. So those were my last 8 stitches, those single crochets in the back loops only. So now you can really see those almonds are coming through in the white yarn. Okay, now row number 4, you're going to chain 1 and turn. And then remember, now you have the first 8 stitches are your single crochets. So you just want to go right back into the very first stitch, insert your hook, and place single crochet into the back loops only. Okay. Let me just take this pink away so you can see the contrast. Okay, so I've just done my 8 single crochets into the back loops only. Okay, so I like to replace that marker just to remind me. And now what I'm going to do, so you can see this is going to be the back of your work. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to imitate everything I see. So every even numbered row will just be imitating what you see. So if I see a half double crochet, I'm going to half double crochet. And remember, we're working into the back loops only for this whole project. And I have 1 more. And now I see 4 slip stitches, so I'm going to slip stitch into there. Okay, so you get the gist. It's pretty much what we've done in previous rows. We're alternating 4 stitches and 4 stitches. Okay, we have, this is the third one. Okay, so there you have it. So we've got our 8 single crochets, our half doubles, our slip, our half, our slip. You get the gist, right? So you're going to do that all the way to the end of row number 4. So when I turn my work here, this is basically what your repeat is going to look like. Okay, so you have your brim, and then you've got 2 rows of white, 2 rows of the purple. So once you get to the end of row number 4, the pattern repeat will be complete. At the end of row number 4, you're going to switch your color back to the white, and then you're going to repeat row 1 and 2, and then you'll switch back to the purple and repeat row 3 and 4. Okay, so your white yarn is always repeating row 1 and 2. Your purple yarn is always repeating row 3 and 4. And I'll leave some timestamps down below so you can just quickly reference row 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and finish row number 4, and I'm going to meet up with you just to go through the color change again, or how to carry your yarn. Okay, so finish round 4, and I'll meet you back here shortly. Okay guys, so I have 1 stitch left. I've done 3 half double crochets, and sometimes that last stitch is going to get hidden because that's that chain 1 that we turn. So be careful not to miss this. So I'm going to yarn over, and there it is right there. And I'm just going to help it along. I'm going to insert my hook. Now before I finish this half double crochet, normally I'd yarn over here and pull through all 3. Because I want to bring back my white color, now I'm going to drop my purple and pick my white back up again and reintroduce it. So that is what I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of these loops. Okay, and then I just need to pull this a little tight, the purple, and then I will chain 1. Okay, and now I'm back to my white. I'm going to turn my work so you can see it coming up the side there, but that's going to be okay. Nobody's going to see that. And then I just drop my purple to the side, and now I work with the white. So now we're going back to repeating row number 1. So in row number 1, we started with 4 slip stitches. So now it's pretty easy. Every odd numbered row, you do the opposite of what you see. So if you see a half double, you're going to do a slip. Every even row, you're going to do the same of what you see. So if you see a half double, then you do a half double. Okay, so we're going to go right back into that very first stitch, and we're going to slip stitch, and then into the back loops of the next one, slip stitch. So again, this is a repeat of row number 1, and then you're going to continue doing this for several rows. So next is the half double, next are the slip stitches, which we're going to half double crochet into. So I'm going to leave that there. So now you can see that the purple is really starting to stand out against the white. It's going to look super great. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to continuously repeat rows 1 through 4, 1 through 4. Remember, your single crochets are slightly different. And you're going to do that until you get a length that is going to wrap around the head that you need. So for me, I needed a circumference around the head of 21 inches. So I'm going to repeat rows 1 through 4 until I get 21 inches. And so for me, I know that 4 of these rows gives me 1 inch. So I'm going to repeat this repeat for a total of 20 more times. Okay, so in total, I will have 84 rows. Okay, so remember that each of these is 4 rows. So just done 4 rows. I'm going to repeat this 20 more times for a total repeat of 21 repeats. And that's going to give me a total of 84 rows. If your head is wider, you will need more rows. Okay, so make sure to test as you go along. So this is where I set you loose. And once you've completed your 84 rows or however many rows you need, I will meet back up with you and I will talk about forming our hat shape, and we're just about done. Okay guys, so I have finished my panel and it looks something like this. I just love how the almond stitch creates this really cool effect. So here where we did the single crochets, this is where the brim of the hat is. And if you make yours a little longer, you can also always just fold it over like that. So I do have to say I ended up going up to 81 rows, and it fits really nicely because there's a lot of stretch in this. And a big part of that also is because I actually came to the end of my purple. Now, not because the skein wasn't enough. That skein was not a full skein I was working with. I had used a little bit of that yarn for another project. So if you had one skein each of that Baby Love yarn, you should be okay. But in any case, it still ended up being okay because there is a lot of stretch here, and I fit it around my head and it works just perfectly. So now just the final stage is to actually sew up our hat. Okay, so first things first, you want to make sure that wherever you end off, you want to end off with the contrasting color than the one that you started. So I started with the white. So thankfully I had just enough. See, I didn't have enough to do the 2 full rows, but I had enough so that I could end with my purple so that when we sew this together, it just goes seamlessly together and you can hardly tell where the seam is. So that's the first thing you want to make sure of. The other thing is whenever you're ready to tie off, so in my case, I had left some white yarn left over because I didn't have enough of my purple here. You're going to leave a nice long tail, and this is going to be to sew up along the top. Now, if you don't have a tail, you can always just cut a separate piece of yarn, but that's what I have done here. So what I'm going to do, actually, I may even experiment to see if see, this is cutting it close for me, but I may experiment to use it. So I generally, when I am cutting a piece of yarn to sew, I generally like to double the length of the item, because even though this is a little bit longer than the length, when you're whip stitching, there is some shrinkage that happens. But I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to see what happens, and hopefully I'm going to have some luck. And if not, I'll just undo it and get a separate piece of yarn. But I'm trying to use up everything I have and leave nothing to waste. So let's talk about how you're going to sew up your hat. So the first thing I always recommend is placing your wrong side facing out. So this is the back side and this is the front side. So I'm going to fold my hat in half so that the wrong side is facing out. And we are going to start by simply whip stitching up our side seam, okay? So we're going to stitch the purple to the white. So I'm going to, like I said, see if I can use this long tail to sew up my end here. So I'm going to get my darning needle and I'm going to feed it through there. And what I want to do now is I want to make sure that all of my stitches line up. So you should have the same number of stitches on each side. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to work in the outside loop. So that means in the front panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the front loop, which is the loop that's closest to me. So I'll just insert there. And then I'm going to find the corresponding stitch, but I am going to go into the back loop. So hopefully you can see that there. The back loop is the loop furthest away from me. So that's the one that's closest. This is the one that's furthest away. So I'm just going to insert my hook there and feed my yarn through. And what I'm going to do for sewing up this project is use, I believe they call this the mattress stitch, and that's when you go forward and back and forward and back, as opposed to the whip stitch where you just keep going around. So I am now going to go into my next stitch here, and I'm going to find the back loop of the next stitch, which is right there. And I'm going to find the corresponding front loop of the corresponding stitch. So that is right there. Whoops. So that's the front loop. So I'm going to find the back loop. So there we go. So that's the back loop right there. Okay. And now I'm going to bring it towards me. And now I'm going to go into the very next stitch, which is the front loop here. and I'm going to go into the back loop of the corresponding stitch. You want to be careful when you're dealing with slip stitches because sometimes it's hard to see. Okay, so the back loop's there and feed it through. My tail keeps getting in the way there. Okay, so you get the gist. So I'm coming in from the front panel from the back loop, and then I'm going to meet the front loop of the front panel here. And that's basically all we're doing. We're going from front to back and then back to front. And here's hoping I'm going to make it close to the end. So let me see. So there you go. So see what that does when we're working into the back and the front loops of the opposing panels? Just makes it look really nice and seamless. So go ahead and do that all the way up to the end, and then I will meet you here. And I want to talk about sewing up the top because as you can see, the edge looks a little wee different, okay? So I'll meet you back here in a bit. Okay, so I have finished seaming up my side, and as I thought would happen, I did run out of the purple, so I attached the white and finished the seaming. Now, because I did it in the back and the front loops, I'm hoping that this is not going to be noticeable. So let's turn our hat right side out. Okay, there we go. So the seam is there. You can see it only because I only had one row left of the purple, unfortunately. But, you know, it still blends in quite nicely. But if you look up close, you can't really see where the purple thread is seaming in because again, we use the back and front loops and I'm still pretty happy with that. So those of you that don't run out of yarn, you would be able to finish a full repeat, a 2-row repeat there. So you'd get that full effect. So you can kind of tell it's a seam, but the way it comes together, I'm still really, really happy with. So now what you want to do is we are going to seam up the top and add our little pom-poms. Super, super easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn it back, wrong side out. And just so that we actually make sure that the seam does actually face the back of the hat, just want to find where that seam is, right there. So when I fold it, I'm going to fold it kind of so that seam is running in the center. So this would be the back and that would be the front. Again, we are working with the hat wrong side out. And here's my long tail here. And actually I made a boo-boo, haha. So instead of leaving the long tail, because see, we're starting from the center, I mean, it's not the end of the world. Because we're not cinching up the top here, we're just gonna sew straight across. So I realize now that if I want my seam to be in the middle, this is kind of redundant, but it's not the end of the world. If your seam wasn't obvious, you can leave it on the side like that, and then you can sew just straight across. Now, because I want my seam to be centered, because it is a little noticeable, I'm going to do it this way. So nothing to be worried about. So I'm going to thread my darning needle here, okay? And so you can see because we carried the yarn, we've got these little loops here. I just want to make sure that I always catch these loops. So I am going to whip stitch the top here. So in this case, I'm going to go from the center and move towards my left. So I'm just going to insert my hook anywhere along the edge of these rows, trying to pick up a couple loops. And then when I come across the top, I just want to pick up and make sure that I also pick up where I carried the yarn. So you can see there, that was where I carried the purple. This is where I carried the white. So these are just little strands of yarn. See that? That are coming up the side. So I want to pick those up as I sew things along, and that will disappear, okay? So I'm going to whip stitch, I'm going to pull that through. And those of you that are, you know, obviously very well experienced in whip stitching, you guys can go right ahead to the pom-pom section of this hat. Otherwise, if you're a little bit newer, I'm just going to do this a few times just to kind of get you comfortable. It can be a little tricky to see because they're not really exact stitches to work into. So you're going to kind of eyeball this a little bit. So again, in from the back, just making sure that I'm picking everything up and then going to the front and always picking up that carried up yarn. Okay, so that's the other side of the other row there and whip stitch. So pretty straightforward. So in this case, I'm always continuously going from the back. See how that was carried up. I'm making sure to carry that as well. And then snuggle it under the carried yarn on the opposite side as well. Okay, and if it's more helpful to you, you might want to pin your hat first before you whip stitch. That also helps keep things in place and makes your life a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to do that one more time. In from the back, picking up the carried yarn, and in through the front. Again, that's the carried yarn. I'm going to make sure to pick it up as well and whip stitch. And you want it to be, you know, a little bit snug, not too tight. You don't want it to bunch, because you do want the edge to be nice and clean. So if I just kind of turn this inside or right side out for a moment, see? So it's just gonna create a nice little clean edge there. And don't worry so much if the purple doesn't line up with the purple. It tends to happen. As long as so you can see here, these are where I did the half double crochets. They're lining up with the other side where I did half double crochets. That's all that matters, okay? Pretty straightforward. So I am gonna finish whip stitching my hat here, okay? So you can see I started from the center, and now I'm gonna work my way to the end. If you were like me, where you ended up having this seam, you can snip off your yarn and then come back over here and go again, but I don't like to snip off too many times. So I'm just gonna whip stitch to the end, and then I'm gonna do a light whip stitching backward to come across. You can never have too much fortification on your seams, okay? So once that's done, the hat construction is complete, and then we can talk about adding our fun little pom-poms. Okay, so I have now finished sewing in the top of my hat. So you can see a few little seams there. I probably could have gone in a little bit closer, but I'm pretty happy with that. So this is what your hat looks like. It just looks kind of like a rectangle right now. And I actually really love how the almond stitch just allows it to have so much stretch and give. So the last thing we're gonna do is bring back our pom-poms and add them to the points. Now this is why I wanted to create this hat in a square-like fashion. So we're gonna sew in, remember we had the little backing, whoops. So we sew this on, and then we can snap our pom-pom on. So just to give you an idea, so when you have your pom-poms, your hat is gonna look like that, which I think is just so adorable. I tried to actually find a dark purple, but I just couldn't find the right purple to match. I did have this, but I just found it just was contrasting. It just didn't match. So I just went with the white, and I think it looks so adorable. So basically, like I said before, you can make your own pom-pom, and I do have a tutorial on that, and I'll leave that in the description box down below. But I found that these just match this style very, very well. So the last thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take your backing, and you are going to just find the spot where you want your pom-pom to be on. And then you're gonna take your needle and thread, which I don't seem to have on me at the moment, but you're gonna take your needle and thread, and then you're just going to whip stitch it. Just a simple whip stitch, securing each of these little eyelets here. I'm not gonna go through it because I know many of you have seen me do it in previous tutorials. And once you've sewn it on, then you're gonna snap on your pom-pom. So I'm gonna go ahead and sew these in, and then do the final pom-pom snap on, and our sweet little hat will be complete. And here we are, guys. The Harlequin hat is complete. So the pom-poms are now on, and now you can really see how it's taken its true form, or true shape, I like to say. And I just think it's super adorable. In fact, this does fit me, and it's got tons of stretch. See how that almond stitch just really gives it lots of stretch. So this is why sometimes it's always better to make your hat a little bit more snug, because through wear and washing, it is going to stretch a little bit. So I'm really happy with how this came out, and I can't wait to gift it to the little one that I am going to be gifting it to. So I'll be sure to post some photos there once I get it to her, and you can see those on Instagram. And if you're not already following me, Follow me at the Stitch Sessions. I'm also on Facebook as well. And I really love it when you guys share your projects with me because, as you guys know, I'm always curious to see what colorways you guys choose for your projects. Now, if you have any questions, as always, you know me, if you've been here for a while, you can pop it in the comment box down below, or just email me directly at info@crochetcrafty.com. As always, come and visit me on the website and sign up for my monthly newsletter. I give away a free written pattern every month. Now, if you're new here and you had fun hanging out with me today and working on this project, make sure to click that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. I upload a brand new tutorial every Wednesday morning. In the meantime, I hope you guys have an amazing day. Stay cozy. Take good care of yourselves, gang. And I will see you guys in next week's session. Bye-bye.